Hi, my name is Jessica Onsaga, and this is Beyond Ministry. In today's encounter video, I want to explore grief because grief is very different than the other soul wounds that we have been addressing and going after in encounters. Now, lies, they act as a filter, distorting reality. They affect how we're perceiving and experiencing the world around us. But grief is very different because while you can pick up a pair of glasses in the process of grieving and going through a loss, they don't have to be tied together and be correlated. When we go through a loss, it is painful, and our soul is stuck in this pain and stuck in this sadness until we grieve and let it out. Grieving is so much more than just crying, because we can sit and we can cry and we can sit and be in the midst of our pain and swirl in it, but not be healing it and be getting out of that pain. And that's what I really want to flesh out and explain today, because in the West, typically we stuff it. We don't want to acknowledge our emotions. We don't want to feel. We just suck it up, buttercup, put a mask on and keep going. That's the general population, I want to say. Now, there are some that make space for the crying and the weeping, but they don't know how to grieve with Jesus to get the sadness and the pain out. Instead, we're just wallowing in this despair and the grief of our loss and our pain, and we don't know how to get out. And so we're crying and we're weeping, but we're not making progress in healing the loss and the grief that our soul is in. So here's how I would define grieving with Jesus. It's facing the sadness and accepting the painful reality of where things are at currently, so that there can be healing through Jesus. The key is that we're bringing these things to Jesus. We're facing them, acknowledging them, and bringing them to Him. It's very easy in our grief to just get focused on our pain, to lock on and to spin out in the midst of our pain, because that's all that we can see. And that's what's the important part of it, is to bring our pain to Jesus and shift our gaze to Him and allow Him to minister and comfort our heart. In Matthew 5:4, it says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." It's so important for us to heal, otherwise we get stuck in the grief. If we don't heal, then that sadness that either we stuffed away at the beginning or we didn't know how to heal and we just got stuck swirling in the pain and the grief, that pain will transform. That pain can transform into anger. It can transform into offense. It can transform into depression, into sickness in the body. And so if we don't grieve with Jesus, if we don't grieve well, then we get stuck in that sadness and it grows and it festers and it transforms in the soul. Jesus first taught me about grieving during my miscarriage. I didn't have a value or an appreciation or an understanding for grieving until I went through that event. And in the process of losing my son, I was ministered to the Lord in a way that I've never been ministered to before. It was so tender and so covering, feeling the comfort and the healing of the Lord in the midst of that loss. Jesus taught me and gave me the strategy for how to get out of my pain, how to not be stuck in sadness indefinitely. And basically that process looked like me bringing everything to Jesus. I have this altar in heaven that I like to go and lay things on, and that's what I did, as I laid down my questions, my offense, my deep pain, my deep sadness. There's a lot of extra emotions than just the loss, because I believe in healing and I believe in resurrection life. So I did all the charismatic things, the healing, the rebuking, the binding, the blessing, the bloodlines, the everything that you could think of in my tool belt, I did to try and stop and reverse my miscarriage. And so in that process, then it's like, I know God can heal. I know He's big enough to. And I know even like after, it's like God's big enough to put the baby back in me. So do I contend for that? Do I fight and war for that? When do I give up? And if I give up too soon, am I giving up on my son? There is a whole mess of emotion and pain and confusion and anger towards God and accusation and rejection feeling towards God in the midst of that. But I knew that I didn't want to get stuck. I knew that in the midst of my miscarriage, I didn't want to give any real estate of my heart to the enemy. And so I laid all of that on the altar, all of the confusion, all of the concern, the accusation, the everything, even my son. I laid him on the altar, and then I intentionally turned away from it. I got my eyes off of my pain and onto Jesus. And I went and I sat with him over and over and over. I did that hundreds, if not thousands of times. I didn't count, so I don't know. But every time that I felt the wave of grief coming over me, which at the beginning is constant and continual, I would go through the effort of laying it down on the altar and turning my gaze and sitting with Jesus. And I would sit with Jesus until I felt a shift. And I don't know how to contextualize the shift very good yet, but the shift basically was I was feeling desolate and broken and in despair, and all of a sudden it was shifted and I was at peace. Now, was it ever going to be okay? Is it ever going to be okay that my son died? No. Death was not part of the plan. Death was not part of the gospel. That was not God's design, and it was not God's doing. But in the midst of it, Jesus was big enough and is big enough to make me whole. And so every time that I felt this grief welling up within me, I would go and I would lay everything that I was feeling on the altar and then go and sit with Jesus, and I would sit there until it shifted. However long it took, I would sit there until it shifted. Now, at the beginning, it's minutely that I am having to feel these waves of emotion and waves of grief and pain and go sit with Jesus again and again and again. And so for those first several days, it felt like all day, every day, that's all that I was doing. But then my heart began to heal. Jesus was big enough to heal every area of my heart. And so in the midst of that process, then it began to be hourly. And then it began to be once a day. And then it began to be once a week. And I was shocked to see that at the end of 30 days, my heart was whole after the miscarriage. God had healed my body, He healed my womb, and He healed my soul, and I was whole completely in my being after losing my son. Jesus is big enough to heal everything, even the loss of loved ones. Everything that we are grieving, Jesus is big enough to heal. It is not honoring the dead for us to carry their pain with us continually. It doesn't honor the dead for us to be stuck in grief. My son in heaven does not want me to be carrying around this despair and this grief and it be festering in my soul and turning into depression or anger or accusation or offense towards the Lord. My son wants me free. My son wants me to walk in the healing and wholeness that Jesus has for me. Now, I didn't pursue healing and health because of what my son is wanting. I chose it for myself. But that concept of heaven is not wanting us to stay stuck. It's a lie to think that it's an honor to them for me to stay stuck in grief and allow that pain to fester. Instead, Jesus is offering with His open hand, saying, let me heal this. I am the comforter. I am the healer, and I am big enough to heal everything in your heart. And I don't know how to explain it other than I feel whole after loss. After the grieving process, I was comforted and I am whole now. And that is available to every one of you. Jesus is big enough. So in grief, there are different things that we might need to grieve. It's not just loved ones that have passed away, but sometimes it's grieving the death of a dream or the death of a relationship or someone moving away. Anything that we have emotion invested into, that thing is now being held as precious to our soul. And when we lose that thing, it is a loss to the soul. Whether it's a dream, a relationship, an actual person, that the soul is experiencing a loss. And in that loss, we can bring it to Jesus and be healed. Jesus understood the value of grieving when He went to go raise Lazarus from the dead. It's a very interesting story because Jesus knew He was bringing Lazarus from the dead. He told the disciples, yes, Lazarus is just asleep. I'm going to go handle this. Come on. But when He got to the house, He didn't go straight to the tomb to raise Lazarus from the dead. Instead, He stopped first to grieve with Mary and Martha, to the point that it says that Jesus even wept. Now, why would he cry and go and be sad if he knows I'm about to raise my friend from the dead? He cried and he wept with them because he bore their pain. He was bearing their grief and helping them get unstuck. Imagine what Mary and Martha went through, from the deep despair and loss and grief to the overwhelming excitement of their brother coming back from the dead. Jesus knew that if they didn't get that grief out, if they didn't get the healing waters flowing, that when their brother was raised from the dead, their souls still would have been carrying the grief and been stuck in the grief. And so Jesus took the time, for the sake of their hearts, to stop and say, hey, I'm going to come and I'm going to weep with you, and I love you, and I am going to comfort you and be with you in this very real moment. And then after he grieved with them, he went and fixed the problem, and he raised Lazarus from the dead. It's such a cool story, but also so important to realize that Jesus comes and he weeps with us. He understands us being stuck, and he values it to stop what he's doing to come and be with us so that we can be whole. Now, a couple more things about grieving before we dive into the encounter. The greater the loss, the more grieving and the more time it will take, generally. There obviously can be a supernatural, like instant healing, and those happen and is really cool. But general rule of thumb, the greater the loss, the more grieving required to get the sadness out of the heart, to get the pain out and healed by Jesus. So don't be despaired if there's lots of grieving involved. And sometimes if you have lots of grief that you have stuffed from the past, and then you have an event, a smaller event that's like, okay, this has grieved my soul somewhat, but now I'm grieving a lot. It could be that this current grief is triggering past griefs, and that's okay. If all of a sudden I get in a car accident and then I'm grieving my friend who died, it's like, those are not correlated. No, they're not. But to the soul, it's another loss. And so take the time to be present in the emotion, in the uncomfortable pain, and bring it to Jesus and go and sit with him. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about grief, it is possible for lies to attach. I could have very easily have said during the miscarriage, God doesn't heal anymore, or God doesn't care about me, or God is absent. Any of those things, I could have decided to pick up a filter or a lens because of the experience that I went through. So grieving is a loss for the soul that we bring to Jesus to heal. But that doesn't mean that we've picked up a lie, but it is possible for us to pick up lies in the midst of it. So with that, I want to go on an encounter addressing grief. I want to invite you to bring something that your soul is grieved about to him so that you can be healed and so that you can be whole. Remember, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. It's hard to face our pain, and it's uncomfortable to face the things that make us sad or despaired or grieved, but it's so freeing to be having that heavy burden taken off of our shoulder, to have a lightness of heart because we're not weighed down by so much pain. So I want to invite you to come and bring your pain to Jesus. Bring your heavy burdens, bring your grief to him, and be healed. So let's dive in. I want to remind you that as we're learning how to use our spiritual eyes and our spiritual ears, we're going to be looking the same place that we have dreams, or the same place that we have memories. That screen in our mind is where Jesus shows us visions and can engage with us in a face-to-face way. And so we're going to close our eyes to remove distractions, and we're going to focus on that same spot where you have dreams. And before we dive into starting the encounter, I want to break agreement with some common lies, because these lies distort everything that our soul is perceiving. So when our soul believes that God is far away, I'm going to see something different than the reality of what's actually there, because this lens is distorting it. So when we break agreement with lies, like God is far away, the Bible says that he will never leave us or forsake us. The Bible says that we're one spirit with him. God is not far away. So we break agreement with the lies, take the lenses off, and that helps our spiritual eyes to see and our spiritual ears to hear more clearly when we address the lies at the beginning. So I'd like you to repeat after me because you are owning this conversation. You are taking authority for your free will and your soul and saying, I am choosing this, both for breaking agreement with the lies and for the prompts regarding what we're going to be asking Jesus. So repeat after me. I break agreement with the lie that I can't see and I can't hear God. And I break agreement with the lie that God is distant or that he is mad at me. And I break agreement with the lie that it is hard for me to connect and see God. And as we're bringing our grief to Jesus, I want to bless you with the courage to look up at Jesus and get our eyes off of our pain. Because that's the thing, is getting off of the spinning out and the swirling despair of emotion and grief that we feel and get our gaze onto him. So with that, let's close our eyes and repeat after me. Jesus, will you show me a place in heaven where we can talk? Jesus, is there anything that my soul is grieved about that I am ready to heal and bring to you today? And whatever Jesus brought up as the thing to heal, I would like you to hold the grief, the anger, the frustration, all the emotions that are tied to that thing, and hold it in your hands. And I want you to ask Jesus, are you big enough to heal this? And when you're ready, I want you to hand Jesus all of the grief, all of the pain, all of the emotions tied to this thing, and watch what he does with it. And just sit with Jesus until you feel that shift. Stay with him as long as you need to, which might include pausing the video, and that's okay too. Just stay with him until you feel that shift. Jesus, what do you want to tell me about this? Jesus, how do I heal this grief in my heart? Whatever Jesus said to do for healing the grief, do that thing. And take as much time as you need. Remember that you can pause this video and stay in the encounter as long as possible until you're ready for another prompt. Jesus, what do you give me in exchange for my grief? And whatever Jesus gave you, intentionally take it into your heart. Just like you intentionally broke agreement with the lies, be intentional. Say, I choose to receive and take in this thing. Jesus, what do you want to tell me about grieving? Jesus, how do I grieve well? And now thank Jesus for the healing and what he showed you about grieving. Hey, welcome back. Now I hope that you're feeling better and have some direction and strategy, but you also might just be scratching the surface. With grief, a lot of times there's repetition to go back again and again and heal all of that previous stuffed grief or a current grief that is swirling right now in the soul. Remember to be aggressive. Anytime you feel that emotion that is outside of heaven, anything that's not love, joy, peace, is an invitation for you to go into the presence and have that thing healed. I am sorry for the loss that you've experienced. We live in a broken world filled with so much devastation and hurt and pain. But I speak hope to you, knowing that Jesus is big enough to heal every area. I am whole in my body and in my soul, even in the midst of a miscarriage. It wasn't God's plan. God didn't cause it, but I am whole and I am complete. And I know your story is going to be different, but Jesus is big enough for everything that we face. So go with confidence. Bring everything to him so that you can be whole in your body and soul. I bless you in this healing journey, and I bless you in this journey of mourning and being comforted. I'll see you next time.